Before 2027, something is going to happen to the US dollar that most people are completely unprepared for. And the dangerous part is, it's not a prediction. It's already happening. Right now, you're probably thinking about inflation, interest rates, maybe a recession. That's what everyone is talking about, but that's not the real problem. The real problem is that the system your money depends on is changing, and almost nobody sees it. And by the time most people realize what's happening, it will already be too late to react. Let me show you something. In 2020, trillions of dollars were created in a matter of weeks, not years, weeks. In 2021, asset prices surged far beyond fundamentals. In 2022, the global financial system was used as a geopolitical weapon. In 2023, major economies began reducing their dependence on the dollar. In 2024, central banks started accumulating gold at levels we haven't seen in decades. And now, moving into 2026, U.S. debt has reached levels that historically signal the late stage of monetary systems. These aren't random events, and they're not temporary. They're signals that something much bigger is already in motion. But here's the part nobody tells you. Systems like this don't collapse overnight. They shift, slowly at first, and then all at once. And if you don't understand the shift while it's happening, you don't just fall behind, you get trapped. And most people won't even realize it's happening until it's too late. This has happened before, not with the dollar exactly, but with the same pattern. In the early 1700s, France built a financial system on paper wealth backed by expectations of future growth. At first, it worked. Prices went up. Confidence exploded. People believed they had entered a new era, but underneath, the system wasn't strong. It was fragile. It depended entirely on belief. And the moment people started questioning that belief, everything unraveled. The wealth disappeared. The system collapsed. And the people who were last to understand what was happening lost everything. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Every major monetary system follows the same structure. It starts with trust, then expansion, then excess, then distortion, and eventually transition. Not always a sudden crash, but always a shift. And that shift is exactly what we're seeing right now. But here's where it gets dangerous, because most people still think money is just currency. It's not. Money is a system built on trust, debt, and behavior. And once you see that, everything changes. Think of the global financial system like a long-term lease. After World War II, the world made a deal. The US dollar would become the global reserve currency. Countries would trade in dollars, store wealth in dollars, depend on dollars to function, and in return, the United States would provide stability. And for decades, it worked. The dollar became the backbone of the global system. But here's what changed. Over time, the incentives shifted. The system that once required discipline started rewarding expansion. And in 1971, everything changed. The United States removed the dollar from gold. That was the moment the system stopped being tied to something real and started being tied to trust. And here's the part most people don't understand. Trust is not permanent. It can be stretched. It can be abused. And eventually, it breaks. And when it breaks, it doesn't warn you. Now here's where things get uncomfortable. Every dollar that exists today is created through debt. That means money only exists because someone borrowed it, and that creates a hidden rule. The system must keep expanding to survive. More debt, more lending, more money creation. Because if it stops, the system breaks. And that means the system is not designed to slow down. It's designed to keep going until it can't. And this is where most people get trapped, because they think they're playing the game correctly. They work harder, they save more, they invest, but they don't realize the rules of the game are changing underneath them. And when the rules change, effort alone doesn't save you. Now here's the part that hits directly. When new money is created, it doesn't go to everyone equally. It goes to those closest to the system first. Banks, institutions, corporations, they get access before prices rise. They buy assets early, they benefit first, and everyone else pays later. You didn't fall behind by accident, you fell behind because of how the system is built. And if you don't understand that, you keep playing a game that's designed for you to lose slowly. Now add another layer. For decades, the world depended on the dollar. Countries needed it to trade, needed it to store reserves, needed it to function globally. But that dependence is starting to change, quietly, not in headlines, not in obvious ways, but in behavior. Countries are diversifying, building alternatives, trading in other currencies, accumulating gold, reducing exposure step by step. And this is how transitions begin, not with panic, with behavior. And once behavior changes, the system doesn't collapse immediately. It becomes unstable. And instability doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like confusion. Markets go up while people feel poorer. Asset prices rise while purchasing power falls. Everything seems fine, but something feels off. And that feeling is the signal. Because when a system starts producing contradictions, it means it's no longer aligned internally. And this is the phase most people ignore because it doesn't force action, it allows delay until it's too late. Now let's go deeper. The United States is now operating at debt levels that historically signal the late stage of monetary systems. But again, the problem isn't just the debt, it's the dependence on it. More debt is needed to sustain existing debt. Interest payments are rising, and the entire system depends on confidence to hold together. But confidence has limits, and those limits begin to show when a system becomes too dependent on expansion. At that point, there are only two options: slow down and accept immediate pain, or continue expanding and increase long-term risk. And almost every system chooses expansion because slowing down hurts immediately. Expansion delays the pain, but it also makes it bigger. And this is how cycles repeat. Now here's the part most people don't want to hear. The system is not going to collapse overnight. It's going to continue functioning while changing underneath you, which means the transition will feel slow, confusing, even invisible at first. You'll see growth and weakness at the same time. You'll see strong markets and declining purchasing power. You'll see stability on the surface and instability underneath. And that contradiction is the signal. Because when a system behaves in conflicting ways, it means something deeper is shifting. Now think about what this means for you. If the system changes, everything tied to it changes. Your savings, your income, your investments, your future, because most people don't actually hold wealth. They hold claims on wealth, numbers in accounts, assets priced in a system they don't control. And when that system shifts, those numbers stop behaving the way you expect. This is where people lose, not because of bad decisions, but because they didn't understand the system. Now bring this back to the dollar. The dollar doesn't need to crash overnight. It just needs to lose dominance, because dominance is what gives it power. It allows the system to sustain debt. It allows expansion to continue. It keeps everything stable. But once that dominance weakens, even slightly, everything changes. Capital flows shift, incentives change, risk increases, and the system becomes more fragile over time, not instantly, but progressively. And progressive instability is more dangerous than a sudden crash because it creates false confidence. It makes people believe everything is fine while the foundation is shifting underneath them. And by the time it becomes obvious, it's already too late to adjust. This is how most people get caught, not because they didn't have information, but because they didn't understand it in time. And that's why awareness matters. Not fear, not panic. Awareness. Because in every major transition in history, wealth didn't disappear. It moved. It moved from people who didn't understand the system to people who did. The people who adapted early protected themselves. The people who didn't were forced to react late. And reacting late is always more expensive. So the real question isn't whether the dollar will survive or collapse. The real question is whether you understand what's happening to it. Because before 2027, you don't need perfect information. You don't need exact predictions. You need clarity. You need to understand that money is not static, that systems evolve, that trust can weaken, and that when trust changes, everything built on top of it changes too. The dollar is not just money. It's the foundation of the current system. And that foundation is shifting quietly, gradually, but consistently. And the people who recognize that shift early are the ones who adapt, the ones who stay ahead, the ones who don't get caught in the transition. Because by the time it becomes obvious, it's already too late to reposition. Before 2027, understand this about the dollar, not what people say about it, not what headlines tell you, but what it actually is. A system built on trust, a system built on debt, a system that only works as long as people believe it will. And once that belief begins to change, everything else follows. The question is not if this shift is happening. The question is, will you understand it before everyone else does?